My name is Alex. I'm 35 years old. Just an ordinary Chicago guy. One of thousands in this city. I work as a department head in a large company and rent a two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts. Nothing special, but it pays the bills. I even managed to save a little. Although for the last 7 years, most of my savings went to my parents. My parents retired while I was still in college. My father, Mr. Miller, worked his whole life as an engineer at a factory. And my mom, Anna, was a high school math teacher. Ordinary Soviet people, raised in the traditions of collectivism and mutual aid. When I was little, they often repeated, "Family comes first, Alex. You don't abandon your own." And I believed it, sincerely, with all my heart. 7 years ago, my parents decided to improve their living conditions. They sold their old two-bedroom apartment in a prefab building and took out a mortgage on a small house in the suburbs. A beautiful little house with a yard and a sauna. Their pensions, of course, weren't enough for the payments. And then I offered to help. "Mom, let me help with the mortgage," I said then at a family dinner. "Son, oh, come on. We'll manage somehow," she replied, but relief was written all over her face. "No arguments. You raised me. Now it's my turn to help." And so it began. Every month I transferred money for the mortgage, utilities, helped with repairs. When my father had a heart attack 3 years ago, I paid for treatment at a good clinic. When the roof started leaking, I hired a crew. When the old Frigidaire finally gave up the ghost, I bought a new one. I didn't begrudge it. They're my parents. I also have a younger brother, Victor. The guy's 30 years old, and he still can't figure out his life. One minute he's a musician, the next a blogger, then a freelancer, but ultimately unemployed, living with our parents. For as long as I can remember, Victor has always been the favorite. Everything was forgiven him. Failing grades in school, skipping class, constantly getting into fights. "He's the baby, Alex. You have to understand," Mom would say when I protested another injustice. When I asked my parents why Victor didn't help with the mortgage, Mom just waved her hand. "What money, Alex? He has these creative projects. Feast or famine, he can't." "And I can, I suppose?" I asked then. "You're the independent one, the reliable one. We can count on you," Dad answered proudly, clapping me on the shoulder. And I silently agreed, because that's how I was raised. The older brother is supposed to help, supposed to set an example, supposed to take responsibility. All these years, I never asked for anything in return. I just helped, because they're my family. 30,000 a month for the mortgage, plus utilities and groceries, plus holiday gifts and unexpected expenses. Did I ever count how much I spent? No, it seemed unimportant, because family is unconditional love. Right? My parents always welcomed me with open arms. Mom would make my favorite meatballs with mashed potatoes. Dad would bring out a frosty bottle of lager, and we'd sit on the porch discussing the news. In those moments, it felt like everything was right, that this support was normal, a continuation of our family story. I divided myself between work and caring for my parents, carved out weekends to help in the garden, dig the beds, fix the fence. Worked overtime to pay for Mom's spa trip. Passed up vacations abroad so my parents could go to the seaside, like when they were young. Meanwhile, my brother Victor lived in their house with everything provided, occasionally helping in a purely symbolic way, putting the kettle on, taking out the trash. He'd sit at the computer all day, insisting he was breaking through as a blogger or learning programming. My parents watched his attempts with adoration, marveling, "Our Victor is so driven." I'll never forget how last year, for Dad's birthday, Victor gave him a set of cheap socks bought with my money, which our parents had given him for pocket money. And I brought a new big-screen TV that Dad had dreamed of for ages. And you know what the most hurtful thing was? They were happier about the socks. "Victor remembers that Dad's feet get cold," Mom said tearfully. They just thanked me dryly for the TV. But I didn't get offended. I swallowed the hurt and told myself it was normal. Parents are parents. They love us differently, but equally. Or so I thought until one Sunday that changed everything. It happened in late April. Spring came early that year. The apple trees in my parents' garden were already covered in soft pink buds. Dad called on Friday evening as I was finishing a report for the quarterly meeting. "Alex, could you come over on Sunday? Need help with some documents. The pension fund needs new certificates, and I'm completely lost with these papers." Dad's voice sounded guilty. "Of course, Dad. I'll be there for lunch," I replied, mentally rearranging my weekend plans. I had a date planned for Sunday with Irene, a woman I'd started seeing a month ago. We were going to Central Park for the summer season opening. Had to apologize and reschedule. Irene sighed over the phone. "To your parents again?" "Alex, this is the third time we've rescheduled." But what could I do? Parents were more important. They always had been. On Sunday, I arrived at my parents' place around 1 in the afternoon. Mom, seeing me through the window, bustled around the kitchen, started reheating lunch and slicing fresh cucumbers and dill from their little greenhouse bed. Dad met me in the hallway, hugged me firmly like men do. "Come in, son. Thanks for coming." The house welcomed me with familiar smells. Mom's cabbage pies, Dad's cologne, and a faint scent of freshly dug earth from the rubber boots in the corner. Victor didn't come out of his room. Judging by the muffled sounds, he was playing a computer game or watching another series. After lunch, where Mom traditionally lamented her small pension and utilities that were growing by the hour, not the day, Dad and I retreated to his study. It was actually a tiny room, a former storage closet Dad proudly called a study. There was an old desk bought back in the 80s, a shelf with worn technical reference books, and the brand-new computer I'd given him for his last birthday. "You see, Alex," Dad explained, rummaging through a worn cardboard folder labeled Documents on a faded sticker. "The pension fund needs a certificate about the Northern Allowance. I worked in Norilsk for 3 years after college on assignment, but the documents are all old, need to be scanned and uploaded to the personal account." I sat down at the computer and turned on the scanner. Another gift of mine, useful for elderly parents always collecting some certificate for welfare or the clinic. Dad spread yellowed workbooks, certificates, some extracts from orders half a century old on the table. "Sort out what goes with what. I'll put the tea on," he said, and left me to deal with the paper chaos. I started methodically sorting the documents, setting aside the ones that needed scanning. Among the pile of papers lay another folder, brand new, with a neat label. Estate Matters. I don't know what made me open it. Ordinary human curiosity? Or intuition already sounding alarm bells? The folder contained only a few sheets. I skimmed the first page and felt my chest go cold. It was a will, drawn up by my parents just 3 months ago. An official document, certified by Notary Sonny O.P. with stamps and signatures. I read the lines, and each one felt like a punch to the gut. All property belonging to us, including the residential house located at address, land plot with an area of, as well as other property, including bank deposits and securities, we bequeath to our son, Victor Miller. I reread the paragraph twice, not believing my eyes. 7 years. 7 years I paid for this house, put my money, time, and effort into it. And all of it, my parents decided to leave to Victor, the one who never lifted a finger to help them. At that moment, I heard Dad's footsteps. He came into the room with 2 cups of tea and froze, seeing the open folder in my hands. His face changed. His eyes darted. The cups in his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. "Alex, what are you doing? Rummaging in my papers?" Dad's voice sounded unnatural, with feigned outrage that couldn't hide his embarrassment. "Dad, I wasn't rummaging. It was lying among the documents for scanning." I tried to speak calmly, though inside everything was churning. "Is this true? You really decided to leave everything to Victor?" Dad put the cups on the table. A few tea drops spilled on some papers. He didn't even notice. "Son, you don't understand. It's just a formality." "What kind of formality is this, Dad?" My voice trembled. "This is an official document. A will." Mom peeked in at the noise. Seeing the open folder, she paled and pressed a hand to her chest. "Nick, what's happening?" "He found the will," Dad answered quietly. Mom entered the room and closed the door tightly behind her. I noticed them exchange a glance. That specific look people have when they've been caught doing something shameful. "Alex, son, you have to understand," Mom began in that special voice she used when she wanted to wheedle something. "We're not eternal. We're thinking about the future." "What future, Mom?" I still couldn't believe what was happening. "I've been paying the mortgage on this house for 7 years, paying your bills, repairs, treatment, and you decided to leave it all to Victor?" "Victor? He's defenseless," Mom said, sitting on the edge of a chair, fiddling with the hem of her housecoat. "He needs support. And you're strong, independent. You're doing fine. Job, apartment." "Apartment?" I gave a bitter chuckle. "Mom, I don't own an apartment. I rent because all the money I could have saved for my own place went to your house." Dad cleared his throat and straightened his back, as if gathering courage for a difficult conversation. "Son, listen. Victor, well, what kind of life does he have? No stable job, no prospects. If something happens to us, where will he live? And you? You're firmly on your feet. Your whole life is ahead of you." "Firmly on my feet?" I felt anger boiling inside me. "Dad, I give $30,000 every month for your mortgage, plus utilities, plus repairs, plus medicine. And Victor, he doesn't even work. Lives off my neck, off your neck." Mom threw up her hands. "Don't talk about your brother like that. It's hard for him. He's a creative person. It's difficult for him in this world of money and career. And it's easy for me, I suppose." I no longer hid my outrage. "I'm slaving away at 2 jobs to help you. And you think that's a given?" At that moment, the study door opened, and a sleepy Victor appeared in the doorway in a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants. "What's all the yelling?" He yawned. "Can't let a guy sleep. Are you aware?" I turned to my brother, pointing at the will. "Do you know that Mom and Dad are leaving everything to you?" Victor shrugged as if it were something completely insignificant. Oh, that? Yeah, they mentioned something. His indifference was the last straw. In an instant, all those years flashed before my eyes. My skipped vacations, postponed personal plans, endless weekends at my parents' house with a shovel and a drill. 30,000 monthly from my account. And all for what? To end up with nothing. Got it. I slowly rose from the chair. Now I know my place in this family. Alex, don't be dramatic, Victor grimaced. It's just a will. We'll all be dead someday, not soon. Shut up, I cut him off. Just shut up. I turned to my parents. They sat side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as usual when they felt guilty, but weren't going to change anything. I get it, I said quietly. You think I owe you help simply because I'm your son. Yet you owe me nothing. Very convenient position. Alex, you know how much we love you, Mom started, tears in her voice. Love? I gave a bitter laugh. Strange love you have. You know what? Since Victor is your heir, let him pay for your house. From now on, I wash my hands of this. I walked out of the study, through the living room to the front door. I felt them exchanging glances behind my back, not knowing what to say. I heard Victor muttering something like, "Yeah, go on, psycho." At the door, Mom caught up with me. Alex, are you really offended? Over money? This is family, son. In a real family, Mom, people don't deceive and betray each other. Goodbye. I got in the car and drove away without looking back. Inside, it was empty and cold, as if, along with the belief in parental love, something vital had been ripped out of me. Apple trees were blooming outside the window. The spring sun was shining, but I felt like an entire era in my life had ended. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog. I buried myself in work, took on extra projects, stayed late at the office. Colleagues exchanged surprised glances when I volunteered to work weekends. My boss even took me aside and asked if everything was okay. Everything's fine, I answered, with a strained smile. Work helped me not to think, and I didn't want to think. As soon as I was alone, the image would come back. Dad's study, the will, my parents' guilty looks, Victor's indifferent face. The resentment didn't subside. It only grew sharper, turning into smoldering anger. My parents didn't call. I didn't dial their number either, though out of habit I reached for the phone a few times on Sunday, the day I usually went over to help. Was I waiting for them to make the first move? Probably. Hoping for apologies, for an honest talk, for an admission that they were wrong. But the phone stayed silent. Irene noticed the change in my mood. We met in that same Central Park we'd missed because of my trip to my parents. Alex, what's going on with you? She asked when I didn't answer her question for the third time, lost in my thoughts. Sorry, I rubbed my nose. Just problems with my parents. Serious? I think so. I told her everything. About the years of help, about the will, about the break. She listened attentively, without interrupting, her eyes flickering with surprise and indignation. And now what? She asked when I finished. I don't know, I answered honestly. I guess I'll live without them now. Maybe you should talk again. Maybe they don't understand how deeply this hurt you. I shook my head. They understand perfectly. It's just more convenient for them to have a son ATM who pays for everything without complaint, and a favorite son who gets everything, Classic setup. You know, my father used to say, blood ties are the strongest, but also the most painful when they break. Irene said thoughtfully. I didn't answer. What was there to say? Exactly 2 weeks after that Sunday, the phone rang. Dad flashed on the screen. I stared at the blinking display for a long time before answering. Hello? Alex? Dad's voice sounded unusually dry, without its usual warmth. How are things? Fine, I answered just as dryly. A pause hung in the air. I could hear Dad breathing heavily into the phone, choosing his words. You see, son, there's this thing. He cleared his throat. The mortgage payment is due. The bank says the payment didn't come through. So that's it. Not, how are you, son? Component placement, not, let's talk, not, we miss you, not even sorry. Just, the money didn't come. And? I asked, feeling everything inside me clench with hurt and disappointment. Well, and what? Irritation slipped into Dad's voice. You always paid. We were counting on it. Counting on what, Dad? I tried to speak calmly, though my hands started to tremble. That I'd pay for the house you willed to Victor? Alex, don't start that again. We explained. No, Dad. You explained nothing. You simply decided I should support you and Victor for the rest of your days, and then be left with nothing. What does Victor have to do with it? Dad protested. Mom and I just want him to have a roof over his head if anything happens. And what about me? Will I have one? I gave a humorless laugh. Listen, Dad, I won't pay for your house anymore. I think that's Victor's concern now. He's the heir. A heavy silence hung on the line. Then I heard Mom's muffled voice. What did he say? Is he giving the money? And Dad's short reply, no. Alex, you can't do this. Dad's voice grew harder. We're your parents. Our pensions are small, you know that. The bank is threatening to auction the house if there's a default. Dad, I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. You're adults. You made the decision to leave the house to Victor. That's your right. I've made the decision not to pay for something that doesn't belong to me and never will. That's my right. Fair's fair. What a bastard you are, Dad suddenly spat out in a strange, unfamiliar voice. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, educated you, and you— It felt like a slap. In all my 35 years, I'd never heard Dad swear at me. So, my voice turned icy. I was a good son while I paid. I stopped paying. I'm a bastard. Interesting love you have, with a price tag. Alex, wait! I heard Mom's voice. She'd clearly snatched the phone from Dad. Sweetheart, don't be angry at Dad. He's just worried. Let's meet. Talk calmly. About what, Mom? About how you've been using me all these years. What nonsense! Tears sounded in Mom's voice. We love you. Everything we have is for you. For our children. For Victor, Mom, not for children. Everything for Victor. Alex, stop it! Mom was openly crying now. You know we always cared about you. Goodbye, Mom. I pressed end call and put the phone face down. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of my chest. I went to the window and stared out at the street for a long time, watching people walk by, cars drive, people rushing about their business. The ordinary life of ordinary people. I wonder how many of them have equally complicated relationships with their parents. The phone rang again. This time, Mom flashed. I didn't answer. A minute later, a message came. "Son, please call back. We are your parents. You can't treat us like this." I wrote a short reply. "I can. Don't call anymore." That night, I didn't sleep a wink, tossing and turning, replaying the conversation with Dad in my head, remembering his bastard and Mom's tears. Maybe I really was doing the wrong thing? Maybe I should help them simply because they're my parents, regardless of how they treat me. By morning, I concluded, no. Relationships should be mutual, even with parents, especially with parents. The next day, I was bombarded with messages. Mom wrote every hour, alternating pleas and accusations. "Alex, think of us. We're already old. Could you really do this to your parents? We raised you. Son, this is disrespecting your elders. It's not right. Dad and I are very disappointed. We didn't think we raised such a son." Dad sent only one message. "Come to your senses. You're crossing a line." I didn't answer. What was there to say? They weren't even trying to understand my feelings, my hurt. For them, only their truth existed. A son must help. Period. On the evening of the third day, Victor called. I was surprised. Victor usually didn't stoop to calling. "Hello." His voice sounded irritated, as if I'd interrupted something important. "Listening? What kind of stunt are you pulling?" He started without greeting. "Mom and Dad are beside themselves because of your nonsense." Nonsense? I couldn't believe my ears. "Victor, they left the house to you. The house I paid for 7 years." "Oh, here we go." He sighed heavily into the phone. "Where's this pettiness coming from?" "It's just money." "If it's just money, why don't you start paying the mortgage?" I asked. "I don't have that kind of money, you know that." Whiny notes crept into his voice. "I'm still finding myself." "Finding yourself? Vic, you're 30. Time to find yourself." "Screw you," Victor snapped. "Not everyone is born a careerist and workaholic. I have a creative nature." "Yeah, so creative you haven't earned anything in 30 years. A pause hung on the line. Then Victor spoke in a more conciliatory tone. "Listen, cut the sarcasm. Mom and Dad are really freaking out about the mortgage. Their pensions are small, you know. The bank is threatening to take the house." "I understand," I replied. "But now that's your problem, Vic. You'll have to finally get a job." "Ah, forget you," Victor snorted. "Making a drama out of nothing. Can't you spare it?" "It's not about sparing it, Vic. It's about fairness. I invested in that house, thinking it was family property. But it turns out it's only yours." "Oh, fine. Take the damn house if you want it so badly." Victor flared up. "I'll ask Mom and Dad to rewrite the will." "That's not the point." I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "It's about the attitude, about how for our parents, I was always the ATM, and you were the favorite son. I'm sick of it." "How petty can you be?" Victor drawled. "So much fuss over a piece of paper." "That piece of paper was just the last straw, Vic. It's been like this my whole life. Nothing from you, everything from me." "Well then, don't help," Victor barked. "Just don't whine later about being misunderstood and wronged." I chuckled. "I won't. And you go ahead. find a job. The mortgage on the house has another year to pay." "Screw you!" Victor slammed the phone down. I sat with the phone in my hand, thinking, is my own brother really that oblivious to the situation? Or does he just not want to understand, because it's more convenient? Over the next week, the calls and messages continued. Mom wrote morning, noon, and night. Dad called several times, but I didn't pick up. Even Aunt Nina, Mom's sister, called, trying to make me see sense and help my parents in their hour of need. I got tired of explaining the same thing. It's not about the money, it's about the relationship. So I just stopped answering calls from unknown numbers and put my parents' contacts on silent. Then the thing I subconsciously feared happened. They came to my apartment. It was Sunday around 6 in the evening. I'd just gotten back from the grocery store and was about to make dinner when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole just in case and froze. Mom, Dad, and Victor stood on the landing. I didn't know what to do. My first impulse was not to open it, pretend I wasn't home. But then I thought, how long can I run from this conversation? Sooner or later, we have to settle this. "Who is it?" I asked, though I saw perfectly well who was outside. "Alex, open up. It's us." Mom's voice sounded strained, as if she'd been crying. I opened the door but stayed in the doorway, not inviting them in. Mom looked drawn, dark circles under her eyes. Dad stood straight-backed, face like stone. Victor shifted from foot to foot behind them, clearly uncomfortable. "Hello, son." Mom tried to smile, but it came out pitiful. "Can we come in?" "Why?" I crossed my arms. "We already discussed everything on the phone." "Alex, don't make a scene." Dad stepped forward. "We need to talk." "In the hallway?" I sighed and stepped back, letting them pass. "Come in." They entered the hallway and started taking off their shoes. It felt strange seeing my parents in my apartment. They rarely visited me. Usually, I visited them. Dad looked around as if assessing the place. Mom sighed heavily, as if steeling herself for an unpleasant talk. Victor just plopped onto a stool in the hallway and buried his face in his phone. "Let's go to the kitchen," I said, pointing the way. My rented apartment was small. 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, old renovation. We barely fit around the kitchen table. It was meant for 3 at most. "Tea?" I asked, more out of politeness than hospitality. "Alex, we didn't come for tea." Dad put his hands on the table. "We need to resolve the mortgage issue." I sat down opposite him and looked him straight in the eye. "I've already said my decision. I won't pay for the house you willed to Victor." "Just take the house then," Mom suddenly cried out, throwing up her hands. "We'll rewrite the will. Just help us, son." I shifted my gaze to her. "You don't understand, Mom. It's not about the house. It's about how you treat me, like an ATM." "What nonsense," Dad grumbled. "We always loved you." "How?" I gave a bitter laugh. "By choosing Victor? By taking my money for granted? Or by deciding behind my back to leave the house to the one who never lifted a finger to help you?" "Oh, here we go again." Victor grimaced and kept scrolling on his phone. "You always play the victim." I felt myself boiling over. "Victor, maybe you should just be quiet. 30 years riding on Mom and Dad's back, not bringing a dime into the house, only taking. And now you get the house too?" "Alex, don't start," Mom said wearily. We're not talking about Victor now. Then who are we talking about, Mom? About money? I leaned back in my chair. You know, I'm not even surprised. You didn't ask how I am, what's happening in my life. You called only when you needed money, confirming everything I thought about you. How can you? Dad slammed his fist on the table. We raised you, educated you, did everything for you. And now you turn your nose up. Dad, let's not do this, I shook my head. Raising, educating. That's your parental duty, not a favor. Am I supposed to owe you my whole life for that? Then it's logical to ask, what do you owe me as parents? Respect? Fairness? Honesty? Silence fell in the kitchen. Mom covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Dad looked out the window, lips pressed tight. Victor finally looked up from his phone and said with feigned weariness, "Oh, come on. Why make a tragedy? It's just a will. You'll live another 100 years." It's not about the will, Victor. I tried to speak calmly. It's about what it revealed about how our parents truly feel about me. What true feelings? Mom lifted her tear-filled eyes to me. We always loved you. Loved? I couldn't help raising my voice. Where are the actions, Mom? Where's the fairness? Where's the gratitude for years of my help? Where's the respect for my work? For my money? Money! Money! Dad waved his hand irritably. That's all you think about. And what about filial duty? What about parental fairness? I parried. Why should I invest in a house you willed to Victor? Because we're your parents. Dad also raised his voice. And you must take care of us, damn it. Must? Must who, Dad? I leaned forward. I must take care of people who didn't even think to say thank you for 7 years of financial help. People who, behind my back, willed everything to my deadbeat brother. Don't you dare talk about your brother like that. Mom lifted her head, anger flashing in her tear-filled eyes. And there it was, defending Victor again, even now. It felt like another punch to the gut. Further confirmation that I was always second best, despite everything I'd done for them. You know what? I stood up from the table. This talk is pointless. You're not trying to understand my feelings. You came for money. You don't need me. You need my wallet. Son, why are you like this? Mom reached out to me. We came to settle things amicably. Amiably? I scoffed. What's the unfriendly version? Dad already called me a bastard on the phone. What's next? Curse me? Withhold your parental blessing? Dad flared up. How dare you speak to us like that? We gave you life. And now you think that life belongs to you? I shook my head. You know what the problem is? You think love is a one-way street. Children owe their parents, period. And what do parents owe their children? To love them equally? To be fair? To respect their choices? Silence fell in the kitchen again. Mom cried silently. Dad stared at the table, lips compressed. Victor shifted uncomfortably, not lifting his eyes from his phone. I won't pay the mortgage, I said firmly. Or the utilities either. That's Victor's concern now. He's the heir. Let him take care of the house. Victor doesn't have that kind of money, Mom objected. Then it's time he earned it, I shrugged. 30 years. Long past time. Screw you, Victor finally spoke up, tearing himself away from his phone. Playing the big shot, like you're so successful, and I'm a loser. I have projects, by the way. I run a blog. Wonderful, I nodded. Then start monetizing your blog and pay the mortgage. Problem solved. You're just jealous. Victor jumped up, his face red. Jealous that I'm a free spirit and you're an office slave. A free spirit living off pensioners? I shook my head. Victor, you're 30. At your age, I was supporting not just myself, but you. And now you look down your nose? Victor stepped towards me, fists clenched. Think you're so smart? Dad put a hand on Victor's shoulder. Enough, son. Don't stoop to his level. Like that. Again, I'm the bad one, and Victor's the good one. Even now, when he's acting like a spoiled teenager, Dad takes his side. I think our conversation is over. I pointed to the door. You can go. Alex, Mom grabbed my hand. Think, please. If the bank takes the house, we'll have nowhere to go. There's Victor's dorm room from his freelancer courses. I freed my hand. Or Aunt Nina's apartment. Or you can sell the car and rent a place. Alex, Mom gasped. How can you say such things to your parents? And how could you do such things to me? I looked her straight in the eyes. Take my money, my help all these years, and then behind my back leave everything to Victor? Mom looked away, unable to find an answer. Let's go, Mother. Dad stood up and put his arm around Mom's shoulder. We're not welcome here. They went into the hallway. I heard them putting on their shoes, Mom quietly sobbing, Victor muttering something under his breath. I stayed in the kitchen, knowing if I saw Mom's tears, I might waver. And I didn't want to waver. Not this time. Remember this, son, Dad said from the doorway. The day will come when you'll be ashamed of your behavior. Blood is thicker than water. The door slammed. I was alone. I sat on a chair and buried my head in my hands. Inside was emptiness and exhaustion. Did I know I was doing the right thing? Honestly? Not entirely. That's how I was raised. Parents must be respected, helped, obeyed. But shouldn't parents respect their children, be fair, value their efforts? That night, I didn't sleep again. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Mom's tears, Dad's words, blood is thicker than water, Victor's bewildered face. Maybe I really was too cruel. Maybe I should help them one last time, at least with this payment. But in the morning at work, turning on my computer and seeing my current account balance, I understood. No. If I gave in now, nothing would change. They wouldn't understand their mistake. They'd just think I'd come to my senses and return to my role as the obedient ATM. And everything would continue as before. I would pay, and they would accept it as their due. It was important not to give in to emotions, not to weaken. If someone spent their whole life walking over others, they wouldn't change from one conversation. Actions were needed. Consequences. That day, I blocked my parents' and Victor's numbers. I physically couldn't take the psychological pressure anymore. I needed a break to sort out my feelings. But instead of a break, a real war began. A war on social media. 2 days after my parents' visit, I noticed strange activity among my acquaintances. First, Aunt Nina called, Mom's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to for months. Alex, what on earth is going on there? She began, without greeting. Your mom has been bending my ear about how you abandoned them. I didn't abandon anyone, Aunt Nina, I replied calmly. I just stopped paying for their house. How can you stop? Genuine bewilderment sounded in her voice. Who will pay? Their pensions are tiny. Maybe Victor, I suggested. He is the heir to that house. A pause followed. What heir? What are you talking about? Aunt Nina sounded genuinely perplexed. They didn't tell you. I gave a humorless laugh. My parents made a will leaving all the property, including the house I paid for 7 years, to Victor. You don't say? Aunt Nina was clearly shocked. Anna never told me anything like that. I thought as much. I nodded to myself. They're only telling the part of the story that makes me look like an ungrateful son. That same day, I logged into Mom's page on the social network she favored, a Russian equivalent of Facebook for older generations. She rarely used social media, but loved that site. All her former teacher colleagues and classmates were there. I froze in amazement. Mom's page had turned into a full-blown wall of lament. How hard it is when children forget their parents. You give your whole life to your children, and in return, you get black ingratitude. What did we do wrong raising our son? Why did he turn away from us in a difficult hour? Under each post were dozens of sympathetic comments from her friends. Hang in there, Anne. Your Alex will come to his senses. He won't go far. Such things didn't happen in our time. We respected our parents. I scrolled further down her page and saw a photo of my parents at the entrance to their house. Dad in his old coat, Mom in a knitted hat, both with sad faces. The caption read, "Perhaps these are our last days in this house. The bank threatens to auction it due to mortgage default, and the son, to whom we gave an education and a start in life, refuses to help." The number of likes and sympathetic comments under this post was overwhelming. Some commenters even offered to chip in and help the poor pensioners in trouble because of their ungrateful son. I felt everything inside me tighten with the injustice and hurt. They were portraying themselves as victims and me as a monster, omitting the key detail that all that time I had been funding their lives while they signed everything over to Victor behind my back. That same evening, I saw a post from Dad on the same network. It was less emotional, but more accusatory. It's hard to realize that your own son, whom you raised to be a real man, has forgotten his filial duty. In Soviet times, this didn't happen. We always cared for our parents, helped however we could. But now, apparently, other values prevail. Every man for himself. It's sad to face old age under such circumstances. Under this post, too, were many comments with words of support and condemnation aimed at me. His former factory colleagues were especially zealous. Men of the old school for whom caring for parents was a given, and any deviation was almost a crime. Victor wasn't left out either. On his VKontakte page, Russian Facebook, he posted a long rant about how hard things were for our parents, how he was trying to support them, but his modest freelance income wasn't enough for the mortgage. My brother, who earns 5 times what I do, decided to make a point and abandon the old folks to fate, Victor wrote. And all over some piece of paper that might not even come into effect for 20 years. How can anyone be so petty? Family is the most important thing in life, isn't it? I was stunned. They had launched a full-scale information war against me, painting themselves as victims and me as a villain who refused to help poor old folks, all while carefully hiding the existence of the will and the fact that I had funded their lives for years. Soon, distant relatives, former classmates, even my parents' neighbors started calling and writing to me, all with one question: how could you do this to your parents? I got tired of explaining to each one that it wasn't just about the money, but about my parents' attitude towards me, that it wasn't just about helping, but about years of financial support they took for granted, while willing everything to my deadbeat brother behind my back. After another call from an outraged distant aunt who declared that sons like me should be deprived of parental blessing, I snapped. I needed to tell my version of the story. The whole story, uncensored. I sat down at the computer and wrote a long post. I started from the beginning. How my parents took out a mortgage on the house 7 years ago. How I offered help. How all these years I sent money monthly, paid for repairs, bought appliances, took them on vacation. I described how I accidentally found the will leaving everything to Victor. How my parents justified it, saying Victor needed it more, and I was strong and would manage. How after I refused to pay, they didn't try to understand my feelings, but immediately started playing on pity and duty. I'm not against helping my parents, I wrote. I'm against my help being taken for granted, while intrigues are woven behind my back. I'm against one son being the favorite who gets everything forgiven and handed to him, while the other is the cash cow. Family is about reciprocity, not exploitation. I ended with, and if you, dear relatives and friends, have decided to intervene in this situation, don't just hear one side. Ask my parents why they aren't talking about the will, why they omit that I paid for their lives for 7 years, why they think it's normal that 30-year-old Victor is still living off them. I posted this on my social media pages and immediately turned off notifications. I knew the reaction would be intense, and I didn't want to get sucked into that swamp right then. That evening, Irene called. We were supposed to meet on the weekend, but with everything going on, I wasn't in the mood for dates. I saw your post, she said, instead of hello. How are you? Been better, I answered honestly. Didn't expect my parents to launch a whole campaign against me. They're afraid of losing the house. They're clutching at straws. Sympathy, but no condemnation, sounded in her voice. I was grateful for that. But you know, if you want my opinion, you did the right thing. Truly. Really? I was surprised. Most people think I should help my parents, no matter what. Most people only heard one version of the story, Irene countered. And besides, helping doesn't mean allowing yourself to be manipulated. Your parents acted dishonestly, and now they're reaping what they sowed. Her words were like balm to my soul. At least someone understood me. Thank you, I said sincerely. You don't know how important it is for me to hear that. Hang in there, she said softly. And remember, family isn't just blood ties, it's also respect, honesty, and mutual support. After talking to Irene, I decided to check social media and look at the reaction to my post. What I saw amazed me. The reaction was almost evenly split. Some people supported me, saying I had every right to refuse financial help after such treatment. Many shared their own experiences with toxic parents, manipulation, and guilt. Others told stories about helping family for years, only to end up with nothing. But there was another half. Those who believed parents are parents, and I should help them no matter what. They raised you, educated you, put you on your feet. In Soviet times, Children supported their parents till the end. They won't live forever. Have pity on them. My parents reacted particularly fiercely. Mom wrote a long comment about how airing dirty laundry was the last resort, how I was blackening their name before all our relatives and friends, that the will was just a piece of paper, and real love wasn't about who got what after death. Dad was more laconic. A real man doesn't discuss family problems publicly and doesn't blackmail elderly parents. Victor, however, launched a full-blown tirade. He accused me of lying, distorting facts, being jealous of his free-spirited lifestyle and creative self-realization. He claimed he helped our parents however he could, that his contribution couldn't be measured in money. "Not everything is measured in rubles, brother," he wrote. "You help with money. Good for you. I help with moral support, my presence, care. You come over once a week for a couple of hours, but I live with them, listen to their problems, help around the house. Which of us is truly closer to our parents?" That was too much. I knew exactly what Victor's help around the house looked like. Dirty dishes in the sink, clothes strewn about that Mom picked up after him, moral support consisting of tales of his latest grand plans that never materialized, care in the form of requests to buy him a new phone or give him money for another course he'd inevitably drop halfway through. I started typing a reply but stopped myself. It was time to end this pointless exchange of accusations. If we kept publicly slinging mud, it would only make things worse. Besides, I felt my position was clear. Those who wanted to understand, understood. The rest couldn't be convinced. I decided to focus on my own life. For the first time in 7 years, I had the chance to spend money on myself, not on supporting my parents' house. Maybe it was time to think about my own place, or that trip I'd always dreamed of, or marrying Irene, who had supported me through this tough time. But my parents weren't giving up so easily, and their next move was a real low blow. A week after our social media war, my boss called me. "Alex, come see me." John Walter's voice sounded unusually formal. I went up to the 3rd floor to the spacious office of the department head. John Walter, a man in his 50s with neat gray hair and perpetually tired eyes, sat at his desk flipping through some papers. He looked nervous. "Have a seat." He pointed to the chair opposite. "We need to talk." I sat down, feeling a strange tension. We had a good relationship. He valued my work, often mentioning it in meetings. What could be wrong? "Listen, Alex," John Walter rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I got a call. A call about you." "A call?" I didn't understand where this was going. "Your father called." He said it like he was admitting something shameful. "Says you abandoned your parents without means, refused to help with the mortgage." "Is it true?" I felt a wave of indignation rise inside me. "Excuse me, John Walter, but what does that have to do with work?" "Nothing," he sighed, and I told him so. But he's persistent. Says you earn enough to help your parents. I couldn't believe my ears. Not only had my parents started a smear campaign online, now they were calling my workplace. This crossed all boundaries. "John Walter, over 7 years, I've given my parents about 3 million rubles. I tried to speak calmly. I paid their mortgage, utilities, repairs, and they, without saying a word to me, made a will leaving everything to my brother, who never worked or help them financially. My boss raised his eyebrows in surprise. Is that so? Your father omitted that. No doubt, I gave a bitter laugh. He also omitted that my 30-year-old brother lives with them fully supported, and that they never once said thank you for my help, considering it a given. John Walter looked at me with unconcealed sympathy. I see, he nodded. Family matters are complicated, especially when money's involved. It's not about the money, I shook my head. It's about the attitude, about fairness. Perhaps, he shrugged. In any case, it's not for me to judge. I told your father this is your family business, and I won't interfere. Thank you, I thanked him sincerely. Don't mention it, he gave a weak smile, though I must admit, he's persistent. Said he'd call higher management if I didn't influence you. This was already blackmail. Unconcealed, open blackmail. He can call the president for all I care. I straightened up. My personal life is nobody's business as long as I do my job well. Agreed, John Walter nodded. I just wanted you to know. And one more thing, he hesitated. He said he'd come here with your mother to ask you in person. I froze. That was all I needed. A public scene at work, my mother crying in front of colleagues, my father's accusations. This could seriously damage my reputation in the company. When? Was all I asked. Today? John Walter spread his hands apologetically. This afternoon. I tried to dissuade him, but... Understood. I stood up. Thanks for the warning. Alex, he called me back at the door. I don't know the details of your situation, but if you need time off or anything, just say, thanks, but I'll handle it. I gave a weak smile. Not the first time. Returning to my desk, I couldn't concentrate. One thought pounded in my head. They were really coming here, making a scene in front of everyone. I imagined my mother crying in the lobby, my father stone-faced telling my colleagues about his ungrateful son, the whispers later. Can you believe it? Abandoned his parents without money? The prospect was nightmarish. During my lunch break, I left the office and called my father. Is it true you're planning to come to my work? So what? There wasn't even a hint of embarrassment in his voice. Since you're ignoring our calls and messages, we'll have to meet where you are. Dad, I tried to speak calmly. This is my workplace. You understand that a visit like this could cause me problems? And the fact that your parents might be left homeless doesn't concern you. Barely concealed anger sounded in Dad's voice. We've already missed 2 mortgage payments. The bank sent a final warning. I understand, but... You understand nothing, he interrupted. Who else should I call? Your brother is jobless, has no money, but you do. So let him find a job. I was losing patience. He's 30, Dad. High time. He's trying, Dad objected, though we both knew it wasn't true. But that's not the point now. We need money now, not when Victor finds a job. Dad, I took a deep breath. I won't meet with you today, and I'm asking you not to come to the office. It won't solve anything, only create problems. Then call your mother and tell her you'll pay the mortgage. His tone became ultimatum-like. Or we're coming. This was outright blackmail. I felt everything inside me boil with anger and resentment. Fine, I said. Come. Just be aware. I've warned security. You won't get past the lobby. And if you make a scene, I'll call the police." "You'd call the police on your own parents?" Genuine astonishment filled Dad's voice. "And you're blackmailing your own son," I countered. "Who crossed the line first?" Dad was silent, then spoke with a new, cold edge in his voice. "All right, Alex, we won't come. But don't think this is over." He hung up, and I was left standing in the middle of the street, clutching my phone. What did he mean? What else was coming? The answer came the next morning when I opened my email. Among work emails was one from an unfamiliar address. The subject line, "From your parents, the Millers." I opened the email and couldn't believe my eyes. It was an appeal to the company management, in which my parents detailed how their son, the promising specialist Alex Miller, had abandoned them without means, refused to help in their hour of need, and shown black ingratitude. They wrote that they were appealing to management to influence Alex, to remind him of family values and filial duty, as a person who betrayed his parents could not be a reliable employee. The email was CC'd to all department heads, including the CEO. This was no longer just blackmail. This was an attempt to destroy my career, tarnish my reputation. I sat there, staring at the monitor, feeling everything inside go cold with the realization my own flesh and blood were willing to destroy me to get their way. Half an hour later, I was summoned by the director of HR. I walked to the office, mentally preparing to be fired. What manager needs an employee with this kind of baggage? Mary Vince, a woman around 45 with a penetrating gaze, greeted me calmly. "Have a seat, Alex. I think you can guess what this is about." "About the email from my parents," I nodded, trying to appear calm, though everything inside was trembling. "Exactly." She folded her hands on the table. "Quite an unusual situation." "I understand." I straightened up in the chair. "And I want to say up front, I'm prepared to write a resignation letter if this is creating problems for the company." "Resignation?" Mary Vince raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What makes you think this is about dismissal?" Now it was my turn to be surprised. "Well, this email, sent to all management. My personal problems are public knowledge." "Alex," she leaned forward slightly, "your personal problems are your personal problems. They don't affect your work, which, by the way, you perform excellently, according to John Walter." "Thank you." I felt a warm wave of relief spread inside me. "But I'd still like to explain the situation." "No need," she shook her head. "I called you only to say, don't worry. The email has been removed from the distribution. Management is aware this is a personal matter unrelated to work. No one will interfere or judge you based on this email." I didn't know what to say. After everything I'd been through over the past weeks, this support was almost shocking. "Thank you," was all I could manage. "Don't mention it." She gave a faint smile. "You know, I have a difficult relationship with my mother, too. I understand what toxic family bonds are like." I nodded, not knowing how to respond. "The only thing I'd ask," she continued, "is that your parents don't send such emails or call the office again. It causes inconvenience not so much for you, but for the workflow." "I'll try," I promised, though I had no idea how to keep that promise. "Thank you for understanding." Leaving her office, I felt simultaneous relief and anxiety. I wasn't fired, work was fine, but what would my parents do next? What other nastiness could they dream up? The answer didn't take long. That same evening, returning home, I found my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Davies, by the entrance. She lived a floor above and was always friendly, saying hello, sometimes treating me to pies, asking about life. But now her face expressed condemnation and even some disgust. "Good evening, Mrs. Davies," I greeted her, getting out my keys. "Aren't you ashamed?" she asked instead of greeting, blocking my way to the entrance. "Making your own mother cry." "Excuse me?" I didn't understand. "Don't pretend." She wagged a finger at me. "Your mother was here, crying, poor thing. Told me how you abandoned them to fate, refused to help, and they're already old, could end up on the street." I froze with the keys in my hand. So Mom had come to my neighbors, told them her version of the story. This was crossing all boundaries. This wasn't even pressure anymore. This was outright persecution. "Mrs. Davies," I tried to speak calmly, "you only know one side of the story. My parents left out a lot." "What could they possibly leave out?" She crossed her arms over her chest. "Parents are parents. You need to respect and help them. My son gives me half his salary every month, though he can barely make ends meet himself. And you, with a good position, walking around in a suit, abandoning your parents." I realized arguing was useless. This elderly woman, with her Soviet upbringing, simply couldn't understand my point of view. For her, children must help parents. It was an axiom requiring no proof. "Excuse me, I need to go." I simply walked around her and headed for the entrance. "You should be ashamed," she shouted after me. "In our day, sons like that were called traitors." I went up to my floor, feeling anger and resentment boiling inside me. They wouldn't stop, I realized. They'd use any means, social media, work, neighbors, anything to paint me as a monster and get their way, to force me to pay. Opening my apartment door, I noticed an envelope on the floor. Someone had slipped it under the door. Inside was a note in Mom's familiar handwriting. "Son, you should know. Tomorrow the bank auctions the house. Dad and I will live with Aunt Nina. She agreed to take us in. Victor will stay with a friend. Hope you're satisfied now. Mom." Attached to the note was a photo of the house, the very one I'd poured so much effort and money into. Under the photo, the caption, "A happy family could have lived here." This was a new blow, right to the gut. I stood in the middle of my small kitchen, clutching Mom's note, and a wave of doubt washed over me. Maybe I really was too cruel? Maybe I should help them one last time? At least with this payment? After all, the house, so many memories, so much invested. My phone vibrated. A message from Irene. "How are things?" Called. "You didn't pick up." "Everything's fine." I remembered I'd turned the sound off at the office after talking to my boss. I dialed her number. "Hi." Irene's voice sounded worried. "How are you?" "Honestly? Lousy." I sank onto a chair. They've crossed all boundaries, called my work, wrote to the director, turned my neighbors against me. And now the house. What about the house? They say the bank is auctioning it. Mom left a note under the door. A pause hung on the line. "And how do you feel?" Irene finally asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. Anger, resentment, and guilt, strangely enough, even though I know that's exactly what they're aiming for. "Alex," her voice softened, "want me to come over? You shouldn't be alone right now." "Please." I was grateful for the offer. The thought of spending the evening with Irene instead of alone with my heavy thoughts was a lifeline. While waiting for her, I decided to check if what Mom wrote was true. I called the bank where my parents had the mortgage, introduced myself as their son, and inquired about the loan status. The situation is indeed serious, the manager confirmed. 3 consecutive missed payments. Total debt, including penalties and fines, is 121,000 rubles. If the current debt isn't paid within 5 business days, the foreclosure procedure will be initiated. Meaning the house will be auctioned, I clarified. Not immediately, the manager explained. First, there will be a court process, then enforcement proceedings, property appraisal. But yes, eventually the house will be sold to settle the debt with the bank. I thanked him and hung up. So Mom had exaggerated a bit, saying the house was being auctioned tomorrow. But the threat was real, and the deadline, 5 business days, gave time to think. Irene arrived an hour later with a bag of groceries and a bottle of wine. "Figured you weren't up for cooking," she smiled, unpacking the bags in the kitchen. "And it's hard to think on an empty stomach." While she cooked dinner, I told her about the call with the bank manager. "So you have 5 days to decide," she said thoughtfully, stirring sauce in a pan. "What will you do?" "I don't know," I shook my head. On one hand, I feel sorry for the house. So much invested. On the other, if I give in now, they'll think they can keep manipulating me. "What if?" Irene paused for a second. "What if you bought that house yourself?" "What do you mean?" I didn't understand. "Well, look," she turned to me. "The bank will auction the house. You can buy it. If it's worth more than the mortgage balance, your parents get the difference. They can rent a modest place, and the house will be yours legally, with all the paperwork." I thought about it. The idea was unexpected, but there was logic. If the house was sold anyway, why not buy it myself? Then all those years of payments wouldn't be wasted. "You know, there's something to that," I nodded. "Need to find out the details." "Wait." Irene turned off the stove and sat down opposite me. "Before you start planning anything, answer yourself honestly. Are you ready to live in that house after everything that's happened? Won't the walls remind you of the betrayal? The hurt?" That was a good question. A house isn't just walls and a roof. It's memories, atmosphere, feelings. "I don't know." I rubbed my forehead. "Maybe I couldn't live there, but at least it would be my choice. I could sell it, rent it out, give it to anyone. The main thing is, I'd get back what rightfully should belong to me." Irene nodded. "I understand. Then let's go to the bank tomorrow. Find out all the details." We had dinner, drank wine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt some relief. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was a plan, not just a reaction to my parents' manipulations. The next morning, before heading to the bank, I checked social media. As expected, Mom had already posted a picture of the house on her page with the caption, "Goodbye, dear home." Thanks to the son who preferred to throw his parents out on the street rather than help them in a difficult time. Comments under the post were full of outrage and sympathy. How awful. How can anyone treat their parents like that? Didn't happen in our time. Dozens more like that. I closed the page. Let them say what they want. I knew the truth, and that was enough. At the bank, we met the same manager I'd spoken to on the phone. Hearing my situation, He explained the options. If your parents pay the current debt, including penalties and fines, within 5 business days, the foreclosure process won't start. If not, the legal mechanism will be initiated. But actual auctions are still several months away. And can I buy the house? I asked. Theoretically, yes, the manager nodded. When the house is put up for auction, you can participate as a regular buyer. But there are nuances. First, the starting price will be set by an independent appraiser and might be above market value. Second, it's an open auction. Another buyer might offer more. What if I simply pay off my parents' debt but have the house put in my name? I inquired. That requires the owner's consent, the manager explained. They would need to transfer the title to you, and only then could you take over the mortgage or pay the remaining balance in full. I left the bank with a clear understanding. I couldn't just take the house. Either my parents had to agree to transfer it to me, or I'd have to wait for the auction and participate, risking losing the house if someone outbid me. What do you think? Irene asked as we got in the car. I think I need to talk to my parents, I decided. Propose a deal. I pay the debt. They transfer the house to me. And if they refuse? Then they can solve the problem themselves, or prepare for the auction. I dialed my father's number. After a few rings, he answered, Yes. Dad, I got Mom's note and called the bank. The situation isn't as critical as you described. You have 5 days to pay off the debt. And you're calling to say you'll pay? Hope crept into his voice. I'm calling to propose a deal, I said firmly. I pay the debt and take over the remaining mortgage, and you transfer the house to me. A silence hung on the line. So you want to take our house away from us? Dad finally spoke with unconcealed outrage. No, Dad. I want to get what I paid for over 7 years. That house I put my money, time, and effort into. And where will we live? On the street? Accusatory notes entered his voice. You can live there, I offered. I'm not throwing you out. Just the house will be in my name, not yours. And Victor? Where will Victor live when we're gone? There it was. Everything always came back to Victor. That's not my concern anymore, I said firmly. Maybe he'll finally get a job and earn his own place. No, Dad cut me off. We won't agree. Never. Then prepare for the auction. I tried to speak calmly, though everything inside was boiling. In a few months, the bank will sell the house to pay off your debt, and it's unknown if the leftover money will even be enough for a room. You're no son to us after this. Dad's voice trembled with anger. Mark my words. I remember your other words too, Dad, I said quietly. When you called me a bastard, when you threatened to come to my work, when you wrote letters to my boss. I think we stopped being family long ago. I was just the last to realize it. Dad slammed the phone down. I sat in the car, clutching the phone. Strangely, I felt no anger, no resentment, only weariness and a kind of emptiness, like I'd just finished exhausting work that had drained me completely. They didn't agree? Irene asked quietly, putting a hand on my shoulder. No, I shook my head. It's more important to them that the house goes to Victor than to keep a roof over their heads right now. What will you do? Nothing. I started the car. Let things take their course. The bank will start foreclosure. There will be a court, then an auction. If no one bids higher, I'll buy the house. If someone outbids me, then it wasn't meant to be. And your parents? Worry was audible in Irene's voice. They have relatives, I shrugged. That same Aunt Nina. And besides, they'll get back the difference between the house's value and the debt balance. Enough for a room in a boarding house. We drove home, and the whole way I thought about how easily family bonds, which seemed unbreakable, could shatter. How quickly love and care could turn into manipulation and blackmail when money and property were involved. That evening, I got a message from Mom. "You broke my heart, son. I didn't think I raised such a cruel person. Dad took to his bed with high blood pressure after talking to you. Hope you're satisfied." I didn't reply. What was there to say? Any reply would be used against me. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I went to work, met with Irene, tried to live an ordinary life, but my thoughts kept returning to my parents, the house, the upcoming auction. Aunt Nina called 3 days later. "Alex, I don't understand what's happening. Your parents moved in with me. They say you kicked them out of the house." "I didn't kick anyone out, Aunt," I answered wearily. "They refused my help on my terms." "On what terms?" Genuine bewilderment sounded in her voice. I briefly explained about the years of payments, the will leaving everything to Victor, my offer to transfer the house to me in exchange for paying the debt. "So you offered to let them stay living there?" she clarified. "Yes," I confirmed. "Just the house would be in my name, not theirs." "And they refused?" Amazement was audible in Aunt Nina's voice. "Yes, because after their death, the house would go to me, not Victor." A pause hung on the line. "You know, Alex," Aunt Nina finally said, "I always thought your mom was a sensible woman, but now I don't understand her. Honestly." "I don't understand her either," I admitted, "and I'm tired of trying." After that call, something shifted. Aunt Nina, who had always sided with my parents before, now saw the situation differently, and through her, perhaps other relatives would too. Not that it bothered me much. I'd made my decision and wasn't going to back down. But it was nice to know not everyone thought I was a monster. On the 7th day after the talk with Dad, Victor called me unexpectedly. "We need to talk," he said without greeting. "About what?" I was surprised. "Not on the phone. Let's meet. In our old neighborhood. On the bench by the playground." "You know where?" I knew. It was the bench where we often sat as kids, watching the little ones play and dreaming about the future. "When?" "Today, at 6. "And?" "Come alone," Victor added strangely. "Okay," I agreed, intrigued by his request. At 6, I was there. Victor was already sitting on the bench, slouched, staring at his feet. He looked rough, gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. His always fashionably messy hair was just unkempt, and stubble was sprouting on his cheeks. "Hi!" I sat down beside him. "Hi." He didn't look up. "Thanks for coming." "What happened?" I didn't beat around the bush. Victor took a deep breath as if gathering strength. "I want to rewrite the will. Renounce the inheritance in your favor." I looked at Victor with disbelief. Was this some new trick? Another parental manipulation? What brought on this change? I crossed my arms. Victor finally looked up. His eyes held weariness and something else. "Shame?" "Mom and Dad don't know I'm here," he said quietly, as if afraid we'd be overheard. They don't know about my decision. Then why? Because I only just started realizing what I've done. Victor ran a hand through his hair. Or rather, what I haven't done all these years. You paid, helped, invested. I lived off them and thought it was normal. I was silent, not knowing what to say. This admission was unexpected. You know, when we moved in with Aunt Nina, I saw for the first time how ordinary pensioners live, Victor continued. A tiny apartment, modest meals, counting every penny. And I realized that our parents didn't live like that. Thanks to you, they could afford much more. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. I wrote a renunciation of inheritance. The notary said, it's not enough. Mom and Dad still need to change the will, but it's a first step. I took the paper, skimmed it. It was indeed an official document with a notary's seal. Why now, Vic? I was still doubtful of his sincerity. Because I finally grew up, he simply answered. Took 30 years, imagine? He gave a humorless laugh. And also, I got a job at a call center. Nothing fancy, but a start. I was stunned. Had my perpetually infantile brother really started to change? And what next? I asked. What about the house? I want to talk to Mom and Dad, convince them to change the will and accept your offer. The house should be yours. It's fair. We talked for another hour. Victor told me how hard this internal reckoning had been, how scary it was to admit he was wrong, how ashamed he was of years of freeloading. I saw it was genuinely difficult for him, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something like brotherly closeness. The next day, Victor called and said our parents agreed to meet. Neutral territory. A cafe downtown. The meeting was tense. Mom cried, Dad sullenly silent. But in the end, after 2 hours of difficult conversation, they agreed. I pay the debt and take over the remaining mortgage. The house is transferred to my name. They can live there until they decide to move. Only one question, Dad said as we were about to leave. Why aren't you throwing us out after everything we did? Because I don't want to be like you, I simply answered. I don't want to use people close to me or hurt them, even if they deserve it. A month later, all the paperwork was done. The house was officially and rightfully mine. My parents continued to live there, but something in our relationship had irrevocably changed. The warmth, sincerity, trust were gone. We communicated politely but distantly, like distant acquaintances. Victor surprised everyone by keeping his job for over 3 months, then found another with better conditions, started renting a room, planned to save for his own place. We started seeing each other more often, just as brothers, without the parental context. 6 months later, I proposed to Irene. She said yes. At the wedding, my parents sat quietly, trying to look happy for their son. But I saw incomprehension and resentment in their eyes. They never could accept that I did the right thing by standing up for myself. To them, I remained forever the ungrateful son who failed his duty. Another year later, my parents decided to move. Said it was hard living in a house that wasn't theirs. I didn't object. Irene and I were planning a child, and our own house came in handy. My parents bought a small apartment on the outskirts with the money from selling their old car. Started living modestly, but within their means. Our relationship never fully recovered. Too much had been said. Too much couldn't be forgotten. But I don't regret my decision. Sometimes you need to be firm to end toxic relationships, even with the closest people. The day my daughter was born, I swore to myself she would never know what parental manipulation was, Never feel that love had conditions or a price. I would love her unconditionally, support her decisions, and respect her choices. Because a real family is where you're accepted for who you are, not used for personal gain. Where love isn't measured in money or favors. Where you're loved simply for being you. I had to learn this simple truth at a high cost. But perhaps it was thanks to this painful experience that I could be a better father to my daughter than my parents were to me. And that ill-fated house? It stopped being a symbol of betrayal and hurt. Now, it's our family home, filled with laughter, love, and happiness. The place where a new family is growing, without toxicity, without manipulation, without conditions, a real family.